John Keenan, current Director, International Recruitment at Gong. John and I know each other for a long time, John. I'd say 10 plus years now, and we
Yeah.
used to work together at LinkedIn. Can you believe it's that length of time?
Mm.
I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this. I was so keen to try and do something around recruitment, John. I've been putting out a few posts and just hearing all sorts that's going on at the moment. A lot of people are being put at risk of redundancy, have been made redundant, laid off, etc. So really, this is just our attempt, and that's why I'm so grateful that you've taken time out of your hectic end of year schedule to just try and help some people who might
Problem.
find themselves in that position.
No
And
problem.
John, I have a number of clients, and one of the biggest challenges they have is thinking about their next play because they're
Yeah.
just dealing with the redundancy. They're probably, moving through the change curve. They might still be in a bit of shock or denial or anger, and all of that naturally comes up. And we're going to cover off in a different podcast during the week, around that. But we
Mm.
want to spend our time today. We only have to around 10 minutes together, John, talking to how people should think about moving forward. So we might just start with, I think there's some good news from your side. The market started to pick up because I know a lot of clients are kind of really suffering in
Mm.
terms of they've been applying, not been hearing back.
Yeah.
So just maybe take it from there. Let us know where the market is and what your
Yeah.
thoughts are from a recruitment perspective, John, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say the market over the last within the tech space, so that's obviously what I work in, the tech space from a hiring perspective has been challenging over the last couple of years. But certainly what I'm seeing in the last 6 months or so, and in particular in the last couple of months, we are seeing companies starting to hire again, getting ready for next year. And there's, some aren't though as well, and what we probably are seeing is certain companies emerging,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and others maybe not doing as well. Obviously, we're in this AI revolution right now, and companies that are betting that in early are probably doing better, you'd see. But what job creation is definitely up, but it's probably more specialized job creation and less generic. So is probably what I'm seeing. But and lucky enough in Gong we're hiring, and we're quite busy at the minute actually from a hiring perspective. But what we're hiring for is specific, so like a core language or a specific position. It's less general. So that's probably what I'm seeing, that there is a definite increase in job creation, but probably more specialized.
Okay, thank you so much, John. So, in terms of your expertise, then, what advice would you give someone around that specialism? Because we know,
Yeah.
far beyond a role perspective, there's a real shift to AI. We
Mhm.
know that people are
Yeah.
talking about maybe, studying some more, learning some more, really getting into the AI space.
Mhm.
We know certainly from my experience and the data I've been looking at, the softer skills, shall we say, are becoming quite prevalent. What we would have thought were soft skills and not necessary in business before are probably becoming more important. What's
Great.
your thoughts around the kind of the key skills that are necessary, and what advice would you give to people around looking at maybe, going back to school or learning a bit more?
So I think AI is very broad, obviously, and I think we are still working out its impact. We're very early. I've heard a lot of people say that this is bigger than the internet when that came in. So that shows you the kind of scale of it. So to say what people need to do, it's so broad. But what we're seeing initially is it's increasing efficiency. So it's efficiency gains is where it's coming in now. But the potential is I certainly can't fathom it. And I would suggest in 10 years it's going to be beyond imagination in certain ways. But to look at what individuals should do. It should just to be upskilled in terms of what's happening. And there is some good diplomas in AI in a couple of the main universities that give you a broad understanding of generative AI, what that is, how that works. So I think that working knowledge is important for people
Mm,
to have. There seems to be a lot of fear around AI as well, with people will lose jobs. Way I'd look at it is I think, yeah, there possibly that could happen in time, but you're in a better position if you know what it is and you can leverage it. I think that's the people that tend to do well and are
right,
doing well and are standing out. So
got it.
uh, it's becoming an expert and learning and consuming as much information as you can about it. and understanding what it's doing to start with, I think would set people up for success.
Got it. So at least inform yourself well enough to be able to talk to it. You might not be skilled in it, and I don't think most people will need to
Oh,
actually be skilled in it, but be up to date on it, learn about it. We know LinkedIn Learning have some free courses
yeah,
actually that I've heard a
exactly.
few people
It's a
have
great
done
call.
and thought it was good. So maybe even just start there just for that information perspective.
It's a great call, but the human element is, see, I think you alluded to that, is vitally important still. It's absolutely in every way, and that will continue to be the case. But it's the people who can leverage the technology, but and then add the human element will be the people who will succeed.
Got it, got it. And so, John, if we get very specific, so somebody is coming out of being made redundant or their role is redundant, if they were to start to be ready to look at the market, and again, we'll go through getting yourself ready to think
Yeah,
about what your next play might be or your next role might be,
yeah.
how should they think about their CV? What would you say are the kind of top three things to look at from your CV perspective, maybe your LinkedIn profile perspective?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, when you're looking at different jobs, tailor your CV accordingly to the application is one thing I would say. So, there's a lot of people out there that resume writers and those kind of things. I'm not sure that's that necessary. Just keep it really concise, keep it simple, keep it to maybe 2 pages. Focus on the skills that you have
Right,
in relation to what the role is. So, for example, if it's a sales role, indication of where you've sold, what the performance is, and then your skills and competencies around that. So
right.
taking the application is absolutely vital. Keeping it concise. In terms of LinkedIn, absolutely vital. A lot of recruiters will look at LinkedIn over CVs. That's seen
Okay.
in many ways. So make sure that's up to date. Make sure it's consistent with the CV as well. That's the thing where people can fall down on, and that can create some challenging interview questions and things like that. So making sure there's consistency between the two and that the profile is complete with the full summary, the positions are in there, and have it reflective of what your CV is. Not as much detail as needed, but at least that it matches up and is consistent with it.
That makes total sense, doesn't it? If you do them separately, it can be hard, but maybe if you
Yeah.
work on them together, that consistency is kind of obvious. I would have
It,
always advised my clients, John, around the including maybe some of the impact. How important do you think that is on the CV? I know if we're trying to condense it, that can be a little bit hard, but I would have thought from, my 23 years in HR, that impact around some of what they were saying would have been important. But I love your point of view on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good call. And what you can do is in a summary piece at the start of the CV, you can add that in a
Okay,
summary paragraph, and that's where I'd suggest you put that in. Because recruiters, at the end of the day, like when they're looking at like thousands of CVs, what we're finding is now, and you probably will find in the market, is there's a lot of under-resourced TA teams, and so
right,
reviewing applications can be more challenging. So make sure that it stands out. And what I would advise is when you're applying to a role, first of all, don't do the whole spray and pray approach, applying
right,
to different organizations. Pick the organizations you want to work for. Look at LinkedIn who the key stakeholders are. Look for common connections. Ask for a warm introduction or reach out, and then apply in conjunction with that, with a tailored CV to the application, and that gives you a much better chance of standing out. I'm not saying don't apply to roles, absolutely do, but just be more tailored, focused in how people do it, would be my recommendation.
That's brilliant advice, John. I absolutely love it because I think that's where people tend to really struggle. And
Yeah,
I think you made an interesting point because I've seen a lot of negativity around recruitment and
yeah,
recruiters, and
yeah,
I've experienced some of it with my clients as
yeah.
well. So I think it's a really good call out to say, not as an excuse, but maybe an explanation that I know the recruitment teams tend to be significantly under-resourced from talking to you, learning.
Particularly right now, over the last couple of years, that is the case. But on the other hand, back to the AI piece, what we might see is that's where I'd suggest we'll see some improvements with ATSs being able to kind of review CVs and do things like that. Little efficiency gains like that may come in time. Whether that's going to make it more challenging or not, I'm not 100% sure. But I'd suggest that type of thing might come in. But right now, it's the tailored, focused approach, and then leveraging LinkedIn connections as a starting point. So, for example, if you want to apply to a role, check, do you know anybody working there? Number one, do you have any common connections who can introduce you? and do that in conjunction with the application.
Got it. That is super advice. I think that will resonate a lot with people. Not throw your CV at the wall. I know one of my clients said she applied 100 times or 100 CVs sent out. So it is be absolutely more specific, tailor
Yes,
it. All of that
yes,
advice is great.
absolutely.
Um, I might take it one step further and maybe look at
Yeah.
it. So great, you've got an interview now.
Mm.
You know, you've applied in all the ways that you've described. What would be your top 3 tips on maybe considering showing up for the interview, how you might consider the interview before you even get there?
Preparation is key. I know that sounds obvious, but look up the person you're interviewing, number one, check out their LinkedIn profile, what's their background. I think that's a really good starting point when people do that. You'd be surprised how many don't. Do your research on the company. If you're interviewing in tech, research what the product is, what they do, what the core values or operating principles of the organization are. Think of examples of those principles or values of maybe what you've done in your career and apply that back. That will likely come up. And then just be really, when you're like, think about competency-based questions in general, how you'd answer a question. Be very, using that STAR approach is really important, and be succinct and concise. And then at the end, just have really prepared questions also, I'd recommend. And back to what I mentioned about looking who's interviewing you, personalize those questions. I see you worked here. How did you find the change when you moved over?
Ah,
Those kind of things work quite well.
that's clever. Very clever. I love it.
Think
I'm not sure I would have gone that far, but it just shows a little bit of extra
Yeah.
prep, and who doesn't love to have somebody have looked them up, Google them or LinkedIn them or
But
whatever.
being passionate, being enthusiastic, obviously if you're going through redundancy situation can be very challenging. And, but what I would say about that is certainly over the last couple of years, it's not a personal thing. It's just a thing that's unfortunately happening to certain individuals. But don't let that in an interview show like as negativity, or you're negative about your previous employer or anything like that. There's easy ways of spinning that experience in a positive light, which it certainly can be, and make sure that is the case. Like, what have you done in that time? I've done a course, I've spent time with my family, whatever it may be. Just make sure that you're thinking of what that gap is and using it, because in many ways, when people have that break and that reflection time, they come in a lot better than if they're moving straight from one job to the next. So it can be used as an advantage.
Totally. And I love what we talked about before, that it's a real opportunity to reflect on what you want to do next. Take
Yeah.
that time to have a bit of a rest, get
Oh,
prepared, and show up with that renewed energy. Because if you bring
important.
negative energy with you, that's a challenge. And people sitting across from you might not know what it's like, I don't know what it was about him, but it didn't quite fit or whatever, but they
So,
know it's something.
so that's the important bit about taking, if obviously people can, I understand people have personal situations, they might need to get back to work immediately, but if you can, taking that reflection time and taking that stop before jumping straight into an interview process would be a good idea.
Totally. And what I would say I've seen work really well for any of my clients who've secured roles recently is they work through their narrative. So some of the clients might have had over a year break. It's been
Yeah,
okay with that. And,
wrong
I
with that.
love that you said when we were preparing for this a few days ago, that
Mm.
gap is okay these days. It's not expected, but you can totally explain it, but be
Normalized, yeah, it
comfortable
is.
with your narrative around it and confidently talk to it.
Totally, totally, absolutely. It can be used as a significant advantage in the right way.
Love it, John. Would you believe the time is nearly up already? But if we're thinking about, anything else that you would love for someone who's preparing, who's come from probably quite a difficult situation, they've been through a little bit, regardless, even if they knew the redundancy is coming, there still might be a bit of a
Mm.
grieving process around it. So it can be
Yeah.
hard to find the motivation and the energy, as you say. But, if you were to sum up, what advice would you give these people getting prepared and showing up on the day?
I think it's what I alluded to before. It's just using that time, in a positive way is absolutely vital. It can be a gift as well. So first, you mightn't feel it at the time, but it absolutely can. In a career, not often you get that opportunity to stop. So, look at it in a positive light where possible, I think is really, really important. And then just when you get those interview opportunities, just make sure that you over prepare, you understand what the company does, as I mentioned, what the product is, you do your research, and you prepare focused questions at the end. But go in the right mindset, take that time, and and try to bring your best possible energy, I think is really important. That's what I'd say.
Absolutely. That's brilliant, John. I'm so grateful to talk to you today.